Hello and welcome back to the What the Falk podcast. We've had a little bit of a break and a lie down as the Nations League took precedent, but thank God Sunderland are back with a home double header, starting with Preston North End on Saturday. Preston have had a funny old season, you could say, so far, and there's plenty to dig into, and we'll be doing just that as I welcome Preston fan, returning guest, Preston writer for the Lancashire Post, and a returning guest, as I say, in the shape of Tom Sandells. Tom, how are you doing? You all right?
Yeah, I'm good, mate. You?
Yeah, not too bad. Before we begin, I have to say I cannot help but look at you. I don't know whether people have seen this video and just think of Timo Werner. People who are not understanding at all what I'm going on about, and the fact that this is an audio podcast will probably have no idea what I'm going on about. But explain that comment to me a little bit, because it was quite funny. We might as well touch on it.
Yeah, so I was in the post-match press conference, sitting in like a normal seat, kind of to one side, and it was after the Preston versus Burnley game, and Vincent Kompany is talking to the local press, kind of chatting away, and he does like a triple take over towards me, and then stops, tilts his head, and goes, "Has anyone told you look like Timo Werner?" So then obviously the room erupts, everyone's laughing and all that sort of stuff, and then luckily we had a guy. Filming the press conference for us at work. So I got the clip off him, put it on Twitter, and I think it's on about 15,000 likes or something like that. And he kind of went a bit viral in the end. Vincent Kompany interrupting his press conference to tell me I look like Timo Werner.
The thing is, I'd never really noticed it until I seen the clip and I went, "Oh God, yeah, of course, 100%." I got that, and I thought might as well touch on it. But
yeah, I get it occasionally when I play football, like Sunday League and stuff. I used to get it a little bit, but not quite so much. Although it's changed a bit now, thanks to Vincent. I get it a bit more.
Not the weirdest thing that's happened this season. Obviously, Preston's had one of the weirdest seasons I've ever seen, sort of ever. But before we delve into it fully, which we definitely will, we always start from the top. Obviously, most recent game, 2-0 home defeat to promotion favourite Sheffield United. Obviously, good team. We've lost against them as well. I think the best side we've come up against. But how was it from the Preston side? How was the performance?
Not the best. It's getting to the stage now, and I'm trying not to touch on all the defensive stuff, but it's getting to the stage now where that was kind of propping up the season. Now, once those clean sheets go, the focus was half before now, was half on the fact that they weren't scoring. Now it's fully on the fact that they're not scoring. So the problem you have is North End played pretty well for about 40 minutes. They were all over Sheffield United, really. They kind of made a mistake, a long ball forward, poor header on the edge of the box. Ben Whiteman tries to turn on the edge of his box, gets tackled, and Ndiaye just kind of carries the ball a little bit and smacks it in off the post, which is a good finish, to be fair. But it's kind of from that point, you're wondering how North End get back into it. Not necessarily because Sheffield United were playing that well on the day. In the end, they did take control of the game and they deserved to win, especially the fact that they scored 2 goals. But North End just can't score at the moment. And that's the biggest concern, is the fact that they were dominant for 40 minutes and didn't score. And that happens. But at the moment, it's happening pretty much every week, where North End, have probably only had maybe a couple of bad games in the 10. And I've got 3 goals, I think it is, to show for it. And it's just not enough.
It's funny looking at, obviously we might as well delve straight into it, because it's the main talking point of his recent stuff. You'll probably have the stats, but I'm pretty sure I'm not too far away. But I don't think any side has ever had the start that Preston North End have had. I mean, first 10 games this season, they've won 2, drew 6, lost 2. There's been 3 goals, as you said before, scored in the entire season, but there's only been 4 conceded. So essentially, that means there's been 7 goals in Preston's first 10 games. I mean, what actually is going on? Because that's weird. That never, ever happened. The amount of 0-0 draws that early on, and the amount of minimal goals conceded, minimal goals scored, I've just never seen it.
Yeah, it is just that they can't score. They were playing well. Defence was brilliant. And they just couldn't score. That's what makes it look so strange, is the fact that I remember North End have had 5 one-on-ones this season, whereas a striker, mainly Troy Parrott, and the goalkeeper, no other defender near him. Well, maybe on the shoulder, but no one in front of them, for example. 5 one-on-ones, and they haven't converted any of them. So that is kind of the bread and butter for a forward. Yet North End aren't converting those chances. they've been on top in a lot of games, at least for periods, and they just can't score. So they've been defending really well, which obviously gets highlighted when you keep 7 straight clean sheets at the start of the season. It's been absolutely fantastic. You can't come out with enough superlatives for it. But the problem is at the other end, they just can't score. And that's why there's been so many 0-0s. Not because they're so good defensively. They have been very good defensively. But the reason there's so many 0-0s is because they're not scoring. Because they should be 1-0, 2-0, 3-0s even. It's just not happening at the moment.
Funny you touched on Troy Parrott there. Obviously, I was actually at the Scotland Republic of Ireland game, and he had a 1-on-1 there, and it was, I mean, they praised Craig Gordon for the shot, but for me, I said it at the time, it was at my end. I said, should be scoring that. Didn't realise it was Troy Parrott at the time. Didn't realise it was Troy Parrott at the time. Sorry, how to do it. He was obviously.
It took a second, that one.
It took me a second as well. I was like, is this going to land? I don't know.
That's another, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's happened quite often. It's quite funny, to be fair. He was heavily linked to Sunderland this summer, and I was kind of on board with it, if I'm completely honest. He had a decent enough season for MK Dons. You can obviously see he's been at Spurs, he's been at top club, and he was linked to a few championship clubs. So to me, it made sense, I think, before we brought in Ellis Sims. He was one of Preston's key summer transfers. He's yet to score in the league. I think he scored in one of the cup competitions, but obviously scoring is an issue. And obviously you don't want to pinpoint anyone in particular, but he's your key striking summer signing. How much of an issue has him not scoring been for Preston in terms of them not scoring as a whole?
Yeah, it's been an issue. It's you can't really say it hasn't when strikers aren't scoring. I mean, it's the same for Emil Rees. I'll say that much. Emil Rees scored 20 goals last year, and he's got 1 this year so far. I think that by this time last year he had 7, so it shows a big difference. He kind of had his head turned a little bit by Middlesbrough. They came in late for him in the summer, and I think it turned his head a little bit. He's been a bit in and out of the team as well, which doesn't help a player like him. He's one of those where he's not in the game. He isn't in the game at all. Not, he's one there. If he's not scoring, he doesn't really contribute much else. Troy Parrott, on the other hand, although he hadn't been scoring for, say, the first 5, 6, 7 games of the season, I thought he'd been playing really well. Played up front by himself a little bit, and he kind of adapted, learned how to kind of bring it in a bit and put himself about really well. Obviously, he was with Tottenham's pre-season tour with Antonio Conte, so he's clearly got something about him. Just signed a new long-term contract at Tottenham, so there is definitely a player in there. It just seems to be that I don't know if he's waiting for a chance to be too perfect, or he expects it to open up a little bit too much, whether he's too used to League One, but he just doesn't seem to be getting it quite right. And he had that, obviously had the 1-on-1 and international duties, had similar for North End. He had one first game of the season against Wigan where he had quite a lot of time. And he just doesn't seem to have, at the moment, that sort of cutting edge. I feel like if he can get 1 or 2, he might then, be able to get, reach double figures or something like that. But at the moment, it just doesn't seem to be there. It's a weird one. It's a hard one to put your finger on. I think that's kind of the case with goal scoring sometimes. Because especially considering one can come off your backside and all of a sudden you're a good goal scorer, but it just doesn't seem to be happening for North End at the moment, especially in front of goal.
It's interesting when you're like 10 games into the season, you can tend to, obviously I've not watched all the Preston games you watch. I was going to say Quest, but obviously it's not Quest anymore, but people know what I mean. Seeing the highlights, you get to watch a little bit. You combine that with the stats and you think, well, it looks like they play this sort of style from what I've seen, and you're ready to do a preview show and chat about it. I can't make head and tail of what Preston's style is. Obviously, you can look at the formation. It looks like a back 3, sort of a lot of modern teams are playing these days. But you're not scoring. You're not really conceding that many. It's really hard to judge on the highlights because there's barely any. And the stats are pretty much, well, we don't score and we don't really concede that many. So what is Preston's style at the moment? What are we likely to see on Saturday?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, that, because I think some of the fans have kind of started saying the same thing. Ryan Lowe is a good talker, so when he came in, he said very clear, this is what my system's going to be like. The plan is to defend with 4, which is a back 3 and Ben Whiteman in front of them, attack with 6. It's meant to be a possession-based game, which generally it is for North End, although there's quite a few kind of balls down the channel lately. Yeah, it's a tough one to say at the moment what North End are, because, like you say, Ryan Lowe says he wants to have an attacking team, but there's a lot of sort of sideways passes. There's a lot of, I'd say, slow for the sake of being slow, or passing for the sake of passing. And I'm not one who's like, get it, pass it forward every time. I can understand where there's times you need to come back, recycle it, switch the side, try and move the opposition and see if there's a gap. But there does seem to be occasions where you could play it forward and make a run off them, and be a bit more direct with passes, not just lumping it. And it just doesn't seem to happen. I think it is very difficult when you're not scoring, because those patterns, there's some nice patterns where they'll play 2-3 passes, but they're playing them about 40 yards out, and it's not threatening. Strikers are running kind of into the channel outside the 18-yard box. Now, if I'm a centre-half and Emil Rees scored 20 goals last season and has got a rocket in his foot, I would much rather him be out there than be attacking in between the posts, which seems to be the case. So it's difficult to say, because the strikers aren't really in the box as much probably as Ryan Lowe would like, and he's mentioned that in the past. But they are, North End generally, apart from probably these last couple of games, are creating chances. So if a couple of those go in, you can probably say they're an attacking team. At the moment, it's difficult to say that when you're not scoring, and you can come off second best quite a lot.
It's funny you mentioned about the sideways passes and kind of like safe passes, as I call it. I think we've all been there with our teams, no matter what style we play, where the confidence is so low and it ebbs away that no one really, a cliche, but grabs the game by the scruff of the neck. Anyone's terrified of making that mistake. Is that true of Preston North End at the minute?
I think to a point, I must say, I think they've got sort of faith in themselves. When you ask Ryan Lowe about it, he says it's not the case, and the confidence is still all right. It's obviously getting worse. It's natural, but they just, I don't know. It's very hard to put your finger on. It just seems like they're just not quite at it. They're not quite. There is a problem with creativity in the team, because Daniel Johnson, who normally would be, say, the creative one, hasn't been in the best of form this season. Robbie Brady has basically had all responsibility put onto him. Get it wide to Brady. He then tries to cross it. It can be easy to defend, especially if you're up against 3 at the back, for example, big defenders. And if Brady isn't on a good day for crossing, or Brad Potts isn't able to jump 5 feet in the air and score a scissor kick, it just doesn't seem to happen. Alvaro Fernandez looks interesting when he comes on and plays. He kind of takes a man on a bit, but he's probably the only player in the PNE team that's able to do that. So I think it's difficult. I think that's probably why they pass quite a lot, is because they're not really able to beat a man as such anywhere in the team, really.
You touched on Ryan Lowe there before. Obviously, he's been in charge for give or take 10, 11 months now, so he's come up to sort of a year in charge. I don't know whether Twitter or forums can ever be a good barometer of any fan base, but nonetheless, that's what we've got to go on. He's been getting some flack recently, perhaps unsurprisingly. How would you sum up Ryan Lowe's sort of first year-ish in charge at Preston North End?
I would say his first. So if we're presuming we're going off of it's 12 months, I mean, I think he joined 7th of December. So, right, so we're 10 months. I would say his first 8.5 months were as good as you could get for the manager in that position. He reunited the fan base. Like I said, he knows what to say. So he said all the right things. He was playing a better style of football than Frankie McAvoy. You could see the style there. You could see that it was passing based, and where people want to go forward. You felt like his hands were tied a little bit with personnel, because he obviously inherited a squad. The work over the summer, the club did very well with the season ticket pricing, early bird pricing, which meant there's 12,000 season ticket holders at North End, which is the most they've had for years and years and years. So everything was going really well. They did a pre-season trip to Spain, and Ryan was keen to get all the fans sort of involved and there, and took a big picture with everyone. And he said recently he's up in the dressing room. So he's very good for stuff like that. These last sort of 6 weeks or so, less so, because obviously it's a results business. So North End haven't been scoring. They've scored, I think, once all season at Deepdale. You've got 12,000 season ticket holders. You've scored once. It's not good. 2 goals away from home, so that's the big trouble at the moment, is that Lowe kind of wanted a playoff push. There was potential there, but it doesn't seem to be the case, and it's another case of what might have been. There's frustration aimed at the board as well and the ownership. Obviously, I don't know if you saw, there's a very long statement the other day from the North End owner, based off of fan frustration, really. The fact that Ryan Lowe said pretty openly in the summer he wanted 2 more signings in, didn't get either, needed a right wing back, wanted another striker. Lo and behold, they're not scoring goals. They don't have anyone to beat a man, which is probably what that right wing back would be. You've got Brad Potts, who's very steady in a way, very, very diligent defensively, but doesn't really offer a great deal going forward. A new right wing back you could have, maybe, who's less defensive minded, but can be there's little pieces there that could have come together. Lowe doesn't come in for too much stick in that regard, because he's not the first manager to be in that situation at North End. But I think a few are starting to tire of the same things can get said post-match. And he's one of those where I think a few fans have kind of said that if the game doesn't go right, at times it can be because the players haven't followed tactics properly. But when the game does go right, it's because the players followed the tactics. And it's like, if they win, it's because of Lowe. If they lose, it's because the players haven't quite done. So that, there's always going to be fractures in fan bases, especially when you're not scoring goals and not winning. But generally speaking, he has had a very good start to life at North End. If you can take a step back from the last sort of month and the fact that they don't score.
Just modern day football, isn't it? You always remember the kind of recent stuff. Your job's day to day. I think isn't it with football these days, as Watford managers will know over the past 10 years.
Yeah.
I think looking through Preston's team, and obviously the team that you've got there, it's funny. There's a lot of players that have came from sort of lower divisions that I remember from our awful, frustrating Mingin stint in League One. Whiteman, you touched on Brad Potts before. I've always really liked Brad Potts. I remember we were linked to him years ago. I think it was maybe the first season in League One, and obviously he was at Barnsley. He's a big physical player. He's a unit, essentially. Who are the players that we should be looking out for? I feel like I've concentrated a lot on the negatives, but ultimately you've only lost 2 games this season out of 10. So who are the players that are currently playing quite well?
Liam Lindsay is the one that stands out in the middle of the back 3.
Thistle man, I believe.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Then went from there to Barnsley, I think, and then
Barnsley.
Stoke, and So I think he was playing at Barnsley with Ethan Pinnock, and he finished second, had the best defence in the league then. He's been brilliant. It was Patrick Barr in the middle of the back 3 predominantly last season, but Liam Lindsay's come in this season and has been fantastic. He's very, for a big centre half, he's very good on the ball, on the quiet. He's one where he'll kind of open his body one way, and he's got this sort of technical ability to kind of fake the pass and check it inside, and like a bit of dribbling about him. But in the air, he's been absolutely fantastic. He heads absolutely everything. So he's been a big part of it. You can't obviously then discount Andrew Hughes and Jordan Storey, either side of him. Jordan Storey obviously stepping up from League One after being out on loan last year. He was still a Championship player last year, to be fair. They just sent him out in part to balance the books to get Cameron Archer in. So he's never been a bad player. Andrew Hughes, in my opinion, one of the best left-sided defenders in the division. He's been so consistent. And then Freddie Woodman, obviously, has been brilliant as well. Whenever he's got one of the highest save percentages in the league. So whenever he is called upon, he's there. Otherwise, you look at maybe Robbie Brady on his day for his delivery, but Ben Whiteman's very good in front of that back 4, just keeping the ball ticking. Off quite often when North End play badly, it's because teams put a player on Ben Whiteman and can do a job on him. So he's kind of key to the way North End play. I'm trying to be more positive, but I can't really go much further forward than the back 4 and Ben Whiteman in front of him, because defensively they've been so good, and then going forward there's just kind of been very little. The midfield's normally the strength of North End, but this season they've just been out of form. Alan Brown, Daniel Johnson, Ali McCann's been in and out a little bit, Ryan Ledson in and out a little bit. So yeah, the defence mainly, unfortunately.
Yeah, Liam Lindsay weirdly is a career I followed for a while, and he's always done a decent job. Yet never seems to get anywhere close to Scotland's obviously squad, which is weird considering some of the players that are in there.
Player of the month nominee for August as well in the
Oh,
championship.
was he? I mean, I've always been impressed when I've seen him was a young boy at Park Thistle, and I'm not that surprised he made the jump up. But I'm going back a long time since he was at Thistle. I'm going to go back an even longer time because it's been a little while since Preston was at the stadium, right? And there was a certain manager that came in last time we played you at the stadium, right? He was in the Preston North End dugout. Now, obviously, unbeknown to some people, potentially you on the show last year to discuss Fleetwood because you obviously covered Fleetwood as well. So you're up to date with Sunderland stuff as well. You know, you're not a million miles away. But we all know what happened at the start of the season. We all know what Alex Neil did for Sunderland and getting us promoted and had a fantastic run towards the end. So two questions in one, really. First and foremost, based on your experience of what he did at Preston, we surprised that he was the man that eventually got Sunderland out? And second question, how surprised were you by his decision to leave Sunderland for Stoke City?
I did. This might. I was saying surprised a lot. This might be surprising, but I wasn't surprised by either, to be honest. I think I was more surprised that he went to Sunderland than the fact that he got them out of League One. I know he still very much saw himself as a championship manager. Obviously, he had a job sort of mid-table in the end in the championship. It doesn't go well. Your stock kind of fluctuates. You know, it might have to drop to League One, top of League One to get another job. I know he very much saw himself as championship manager. I think kind of like Simon Grayson did when he left Sunderland, because obviously the last time PNE played Sunderland, Simon Grayson was in charge for the first half season. Then it was Chris Coleman, I think, when we were at the Stadium of Light. But I was more surprised than that Alex Neil dropped down, because it was a massive risk for him. If he didn't get Sunderland promoted in that 6-month spell he had there, he is then a League One manager. Not like either way, he stuck there, and he was I know he's very keen to kind of make sure he was still seen as a top manager. Obviously, it worked, which again, not particularly surprising. I think he's a fantastic manager, one of the best. Well, currently probably the best that North End have had, in my opinion, since I can really remember. So I'm 25. So early days of Billy Davies, I wasn't quite with it then. I'm only like 7 or 8 and got to the playoff final then. But in terms of like a modern manager, in terms of the press and the way he played football, he was fantastic. It completely changed the way North End were, stepped him up a level. And a lot of that sort of legacy still is here today, where Ryan Lowe, in the way he presses, is trying to adapt players like Alan Brown and Daniel Johnson, who've been used to pressing in Alex Neil's style. So I wasn't surprised that he got the job done at Sunderland. From the outside, Sunderland seemed a bit of a poison chalice where no one seemed to quite be able to grasp whether it's the club or what was going on there and get them over the line. In terms of him going to Stoke, he'd had interest before when he was at North End, and I know he listened and kind of took an interest in it, considered it. I think he spoke after he left North End, basically saying he was too loyal to North End. He had opportunities to leave, maybe should have done. But the fact that Stoke came in again, who are a more settled club at this level, maybe not necessarily, obviously they don't have the same fan base, all that sort of stuff, but they are a more settled club at this level. There's less risk for him there. He's got more chance of being a championship manager this time next year. And he will get money to spend. And it's closer to home. He still lives very close to Preston, well, pretty much in Preston. It's about, it's a much smaller commute than it is to get to Sunderland or to stay in Sunderland during the week. So to be honest, it just kind of makes sense for Alex Neil personally. Opinions obviously will vary on whether Sunderland to Stoke is a sideways step, all that sort of stuff from the outside, not having those affinities. I would say it's a more secure job because Sunderland is still new to the division. You don't know how things will go. Obviously, that's kind of his job to settle Sunderland, so that's part of it. But I think it kind of makes sense for Alex Neil. Whether it does in football or for Sunderland is another matter, but for Alex Neil, it sort of just made sense.
It's interesting because I think obviously at the time that he left, we'd started really well. Obviously, everything he had here it felt really, really good. And obviously when he did leave, like I was gutted. because you always kind of get a kick in the gut with Sunderland sometimes, and it felt like, things have just got good, and that's happened. But as it is, to be completely honest, we've managed to be absolutely fine since he's left, and we're fifth off top. We appear to be playing just as well, and all of a sudden, maybe you think, is Alex Neil looking and thinking, maybe the best chance of staying in the Championship was maybe with Sunderland after all. But we've done quite well under Tony Mowbray, really well actually. It's early days, but we appear to be playing just as well, if not better. What have you made of Sunderland start as a whole, and also the way that we've reacted to obviously Alex Neil leaving, which was evidently a massive blow. Let's not deny it.
Yeah, I think I always think the promoted clubs will start generally quite well because you're still on the crest of a wave. North End have had it for the last few years where Wigan really weren't expected to be much to get a draw at North End the season before. I think they got turned over by Hull 4-1 just after winning the title. So often teams that come up, it's more probably this period where they might falter. They've kind of had time to reflect the international break. They've caught the breath, and then they might start struggling. I think Tony Mowbray personally is a perfect appointment, really. He had an issue when he was at Blackburn as he was still commuting from the northeast. So, excuse me, he never quite settled. But he did a fantastic job at Blackburn, got them settled in the league and had a couple of playoff pushes. So if you can do similar with Sunderland, and obviously he knows the area better and stuff like that, he can connect a bit more. If he gets Sunderland settled in the league, he's done that before with another club. He can consolidate in that league and then improve and push on. So from the outside again, it looks like a very good appointment. I kind of expected results to drop off a little bit whilst Mowbray got settled and kind of maybe turned around a few probably gutted players that the managers left. But credit to him, I suppose, probably his experience and his quality as manager, the fact that he's kind of kept things going.
In terms of the two teams going into the game on Saturday, obviously we're a team that has currently no fit strikers, although Ellis Sims might be back on Saturday. But we're a team with no strikers that is scoring lots of goals, 5 with basically false number 9s or number 10s, whereas Preston, as we've touched on, are a team with strikers that are not scoring at the moment. You said your defence is playing well, though. Obviously, the stats prove that as well. And while you may not be doing much up top, you're doing probably better than most teams, any team, I think, in the league at the back. So where can Sunderland damage Preston on Saturday? Which are the players that you're most concerned by?
Honestly, defensively, none. I think, potentially Robbie Brady got caught out a little bit at home to Birmingham, didn't track his man who gets a header at the far post, but Brad Potts on the other side is brilliant when it comes to that. And the back three have been fantastic. Jordan Story, a little bit of an error with a poor header against Sheffield United. Then Andrew Hughes miscontrolled the ball, and that's an error. Led to a goal for the second one at Sheffield United. But otherwise, there's no one, especially in that back sort of 5, where you think they could get at him today. Jordan Story, when he gets kind of slowed down a little bit, because sometimes get beaten by a dribble. But other than that, I mean, you say that, but they're barely conceding a goal, so it's probably a bit harsh. Defensively, yeah, they're very good. It'll be interesting how they cope with the false 9 system, whether, people can track the man properly, stuff like that. But when you've got Ben Whiteman sitting just in front, maybe that helps. So yeah, in terms of like weaknesses in terms of where Sunderland can get at, I don't think there's anything going into it. Obviously, it changes game to game. Someone can have a bad game every week. It's just the way football goes. But like generally speaking, there isn't too much to be worried about from a PNE point of view, defensively particularly.
Regarding the game on Saturday, obviously, as always, we do a prediction here. I don't think I've got any right so far at all, which is true to form and just proves that I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. But I think it'll be a funny game on Saturday. I think I do fancy us to win, but in a really weird way, despite everything we've spoke about on this podcast, I still fancy Preston to score. And I actually fancy, just because the way that the game works, when you go and do a podcast about how Preston North End can't score and Sunderland are playing quite well, Sunderland tend to have a ropey performance where we maybe nick something and Preston will score a few goals. So I'm going to go completely outlandish and say 3-2 Sunderland. No stats back that up.
It's as good a guess as any at the moment, because it's one of those where I think it'll either be 0-0 or, the floodgates will open. Just because North End can't score, and I can't predict against North End, can I? So I'll go 1-0 PNE. But yeah, just because the blind hope that PNE will score a goal somehow. Hopefully.
Football
Please.
is just blind hope, isn't it? I think it has been for Sunderland for a long, long time. But Tom, lovely to have you on chatting about the team that you actually support this time. And obviously, unbeknown to some people, we're technically colleagues, mate. So I wish you all the luck at work and in real life.
Yeah, you too, mate. All the best.
Cheers, Jeff. Thank you.